things that's so cool about comedy is that people don't laugh on purpose, right?
Yeah.
You can pretty much tell when someone laughs falsely.
Yeah.
And so it's actually a form of spontaneous honesty. It's pre-conscious.
Yeah.
And so it's a very effective, it's very interesting.
Well, I saw recently a clip of one of the I won't name names, but one of the very woke comics in the UK in a BBC audience. You could tell the audience were forcing themselves to laugh because they wanted to show approval for the message that was being
moral virtue.
And I felt like, I think it was maybe Leo Kearse at GB News. He was saying that that's the punishment for the woke.
Yeah.
They have to sit through these things and force themselves to laugh.
Yeah.
It's that distinction between what they call clapter, when you see where people are applauding out of approval for what is being said.
Aren't we good guys?
What's much better is that involuntary laugh when you think, I really shouldn't have laughed at that.
Well, that's the thing. It's even better then. The best kind of laughter is when you're ashamed of yourself for laughing. It's or for saying it. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. But it was like necessary, and it was funny.
It's an escape valve, and I've never seen riots in Dublin until last year. I think it was last year they happened. It wasn't earlier this year. Yeah. I've never seen riots in Dublin. I grew up in Dublin. I've never seen a riot in Dublin.
Montreal too, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, horrible.
Oh my God, yes.
Because, and I'm not saying I'm not making any great claims for comedy, but one of the things that it does do is that it lets a little bit of steam out when everyone notices the same thing at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And maybe people aren't talking about it elsewhere. So comedy and satire is a great place to let this steam out. But we have a show called Have I Got News for You in the UK. And if it's supposed to be collect the news of the recent week, and you could watch it and not have a clue that any of the stuff we spoke about today is going on.
Yeah.
Because they deliberately avoid anything that will get them complaints. And as a result, it's like completely toothless as a satirical show. We need things that make people, that just make people feel a bit sane. That's what we tried to do with my YouTube about the gender issue.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make people, you have noticed that. People are.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
That's the reestablishment of a consensus of truth. Like, you notice that it's much harder to make 10 people laugh in a crowd if there's only 10 than 1,000.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's something about the anonymity of a crowd, but there's also something about the fact that when everyone laughs together, it's the establishment of a new consensus of the previously unspoken based on the self-evident truth, because everyone wouldn't be laughing if it wasn't true, right?
Yes.
It has to, and if that wasn't a true response. And it's also sudden and uncontrollable.
Yeah.
There's another weird thing about laughter. I used to do this as a joke with a couple of my friends when we were lifting weights in the gym, because if you make someone laugh when they're in the middle of a bench press, that they'll drop the weight on their chest. Well, you lose all your muscular control when you laugh.
Yeah.
Which is also extremely interesting, because it means that in the moment of laughter, you render yourself defenseless and vulnerable, which is also extremely interesting, right? Especially because it's also
relaxing.
Intensely pleasurable. Yes, exactly.
Yes,
It's a very weird...
But don't you find it depressing, though, that so many comedians, you call them regime comedians, but comedians in the UK don't recognise that this is a problem. They don't think it is a problem because their opinions are the orthodox opinions. But also, we did a stand-up gig in Dublin, 4 months ago or something, which was cancelled on us.
Yeah.
Activists phoned up Graham and I were both performing that night, a couple of other comics. It was part of my Comedy Unleashed thing.
Right.
And the activists phoned up the venue and they said, okay, we won't put it on then. They're too scared.
Yeah.
And then we found another venue at the last minute and it was fine. But how can any comic today say that is a situation that...
You answered that question earlier. It provides an avenue to success for absolutely mediocre people.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then they can say two things. I'm just as funny as Graham Linehan, for example. Plus, I'm definitely morally superior. And that's a huge accomplishment.
Or do they genuinely think that we are spreading hate through the medium of humour? Do they believe that Count Dankula was trying to recruit people to neo-Nazism through the medium of pugs?
Well, I did. I can answer that. I did.
It's complicated.
He did think that, you see?
I know. It's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
Right, okay.
You never want to underestimate the attractiveness of unearned moral virtue. Like in the gospel accounts, for example, the people who end up crucifying Christ are the Pharisees, right? It's Pharisees, that's religious hypocrites. Yeah. Those are the people who are claiming to be good when they're not. It's the scribes, those are the academics, right? Who use truth in the service of their own self-interest, and the lawyers, and they're the ones who use legalism as an alternative to morality. That proclivity has been around forever.
Yes.
And the temptation, one of the commandments is do not use the name of God in vain. And everyone thinks that means don't swear. That isn't what it means. It means don't claim to be doing the work of the divine when you're pursuing your own self-interest.
Right.
And it's really necessary to understand that that's a temptation. You know, so for example, when I said, just get the damn vaccine. Now, was I being good or was I signaling a kind of moral virtue? And I would say, I think I wasn't being good at all in that situation. I think I was signaling a form of moral virtue. It's like, come on, all the sensible people are like me are going to do this. And you can tell that in consequence of the fact that I've already done it. You know, like I said, I can plead illness at the time, but that's still.
But there's also the apparatus that I was talking about earlier. You just take it as a normal thing that you would issue a statement on it. And we all do. I remember that in the before times on Twitter, if everyone's talking about something, you sit there thinking, oh, I better come up with a joke.
Yeah.
Who cares if you talk or not? I don't really like knowing, the way in the old days, you'd watch a show like The Monkees. Like I used to love The Monkees, the TV show they had, and then you'd wonder about these people and you'd hear from them every so often for the rest of your life, just in little spots. And then when they died, but now they are telling you their political opinions all day, every day,
which you don't want to know,
which you either don't want to know or maybe you think you want to know and you actually don't.
Well, worse still, they're not necessarily their opinions; they're the opinions they feel they have to transmit.
My point is,
they're also no more interesting than anyone else's opinions.
Absolutely.
I went and saw John Cleese, who. Like, I love John Cleese. He was like a savior to me in my adolescence. All of my friends were John Cleese freaks, and he's so funny. And I went and saw his live show 5 years ago, and he talked about making Life of Brian and about, all the great movies they made. And that was so interesting. And then he talked about Trump, which was like not interesting. It was like listening to your neighbor talk about Trump. And I suppose that's another one of the cataclysmic problems of this interconnectedness.
Why? I mean, I don't.
What I'm saying is that we're all on a stage now. As soon as you have a Twitter account or Facebook or whatever, you step onto a stage. And I think that being audience facing is perhaps not the best thing for us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, can you imagine having that problem when you're a teenager?
Yes.
And having that follow you for the rest of your life?
How many lives have been ruined?
But I would say that I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with a celebrity expressing an opinion. And I think there's a distinction to be drawn. I mean, I've spoken with John Cleese about he has sincerely held convictions that he's entitled to express. And I think that is very different from, for instance, to give an example, an actor friend of mine during the Black Lives Matter riots was contacted by her agent saying, you haven't put up a black square in support of Black Lives Matter. If you don't do that, I won't be able to find work for you. That's not going to happen. Therefore, you have someone in the arts industry now feeling they have to convey an opinion that they don't sincerely hold, otherwise their livelihood will be taken away from them. Now, I think that's the risk. Part of
the problem here might be, and I've certainly had this problem on Twitter. It's like Twitter is like talking to your friends or your roommates in college, except that it's not, because it goes out to millions of people.
Well, it's performance.
It's like seriously not that, even though it feels like that. And so, maybe one of the rules with X, for example, or social media in general, is if you play with fire, you're going to be burned. And you're playing with fire whether the match is hot or not on social media. My son has told me, he said, Dad, you have to remember when you're on X that you're actually publishing. Right, and it's certainly the case that I spend a lot less time on any given tweet than I would on any sentence that's in one of my books.
Well, there's that. I'm often catching myself in that. If I get into a Twitter spat or an argument, which I do more than I should, sometimes I catch myself and I think, am I trying to be seen to win?
Right.
More than getting to the truth of the point.
Right.
And that's the point.
Well, and anger will certainly motivate that.
And that's when I tend to withdraw from it. If I think I'm messing up now, I'm trying to humiliate this person.
It's a power game now.
Right, and I don't like that about myself. I'm sure everyone has it.
Oh,
definitely. But I think being aware of the performative element of social media, it's just not.
It's hard to be aware of it though, because you just have to go click and away you go. It's like
just not
there's
the forum.
no lag.
It's not the forum for discussion. It just isn't. Something about it rewards extremism. It
rewards impulsive behavior.
It does.
Right. It's set up to incentivize impulsive behavior. And
Yes.
we have no idea. Like, impulsive behavior is a bad medium to long-term strategy.
Yeah.
And that's the sine qua non of Twitter. And so it just might be a game that degenerates as you play it.
I'm
Right.
kind of confused by Elon's decision to put in the For You tab, which seems like a surefire way to create kind of discord and arguments.
I just don't look at that tab. I look at the things that I'm following.
lot of
Yeah,
people are
I also
saying
don't look at it.
it's
because it's too pathological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it just aggregates bad actors.